So hey everyone, my name is Gabriella, and this is another video in the series that I'm doing on the different modalities that I use in my care work with my clients. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a spiritual care provider, and I offer a variety of different modalities in my work, one-on-one with clients and also in groups on occasion. So this video is specifically focused on queer trans spiritual care. And it's specifically oriented towards helping queer and trans folk through their discernment processes with regards to their own gender identity, their gender expression, and or their sexuality and sexual orientation, as well as whether or not they wish to pursue coming out publicly about any of these things, and if so, how they want to do so. And the focus that I kind of bring to all of those conversations is what is the spiritual quality of all of those discernments, and how might the person that I'm working with want to imbue any of their explorations and coming outs possibly with spiritual meaning, including the possibility of having ceremonial container for their coming outs, or for whatever feels significant to them in terms of exploring their gender, their sexuality. And I highlight this as a care modality because, well, let's just say that this particular kind of care could fall into some of the other categories of work that I do, with a queer or trans person wanting to work with me when it comes to spiritual direction or ritual consults, or some of my other modalities. But I want to highlight specifically the fact that I offer care to queer trans people, because there is a particular experience for a lot of queer trans folk that include religious trauma, religious abuse, and just the reality that there's a lot of homophobia and transphobia in the world that is heavily fueled by um, particular religious doctrines, religious ideologies, and theologies, that are just, obviously have been really damaging for the well-being of queer trans people. Um, and at the same time, queer trans people are, in my own assessment and experience of folks in our communities. I'm speaking, by the way, as someone who is queer and who is gender fluid. I have, ever since I was a child, had a very rich, sometimes confusing, sort of process of, understanding and discerning my own gender and sexuality. And I, speak from some amount of personal experience, just, with, even though I didn't grow up, religious, there's no way to avoid, at this point, noticing that a lot of religious and spiritual spaces are very harmful for queer and trans people. And also, queer and trans people are often very deeply spiritual people, even if the communities that we find ourselves in are not amenable to us being there. And so, there are actually many statistics and data, research projects that have been done at this point to prove that queer people and trans people are not just deeply spiritual, but they're sometimes actually also, the majority of queer trans people are also deeply religious, despite a lot of harm from religious institutions. And so there's just no way around, and the fact that queer trans people, even though we have experienced, by some metrics, an inordinate amount of rejection and harm on the part of religious and spiritual institutions, we are no less in need of spiritual care and containers, to help us in our own spiritual discernment and our spiritual journeys. and we are also, of course, in need of having space held for us to be able to bring together our experiences of gender and sexuality with our spiritual experiences. And I think that if that is not explicitly highlighted on the part of spiritual care providers, sometimes it can leave queer trans folks wondering if that provider is amenable to supporting someone who is queer or trans, and or both, with whatever it is that they're navigating, both in terms of their gender and sexuality and also their spiritual lives. So if you're someone who is discerning for yourself what your sexuality is, or what your gender is, or if you're someone who's well established in your understanding of yourself on those fronts, but are longing to bring that understanding, whether it's established or blooming, into conversation with your spiritual self. I deeply, deeply encourage and recommend that, whether it's working with me or with someone else, because the queer trans experience is one that, because it remains at this point in time a very countercultural experience, and is also one where we are bumping up against norms around what love means, around what self-expression means. Those are incredibly rich territories for spiritual exploration, because most spiritual traditions the world over that have stood the test of time speak to those topics of love and self-expression and most importantly, relationships, right, between parts of ourselves and ourselves, between us and other people, and between us and all of reality, as well as entire communities and, the larger reality that we live in. My cat is approaching me, so I'm just gonna introduce her to all of you who are watching. This is Nora. She says hello to all the beautiful queer trans people out there. What was I going to say? Right. The way that the queer trans experience is heavily resonant in my own understanding with spiritual explorations writ large, because it inevitably brings up questions about how we are in relationship in the world, and how we are choosing to love and express ourselves, often in a way that is inviting a larger culture to expand, into vaster definitions than it previously had of love and expression and relationships just writ large. So in addition, given that coming out, whether it's coming out on the sexuality front or on a gender front, for those of us who choose to do it, whether it's a public, sort of public thing or a much more private thing, that is a major threshold crossing. And especially for those of us who are considering things like top surgery or hormone treatment or processes that are very much contributing to shifts within the somatic vessel of the self. Though there is a beautiful opportunity there to imbue that experience with ritual meaning and given the just what am I trying to say here? The way that a lot of times coming outs can, in a way, just be seen as a practical thing, like, oh, I just gotta let people know because, that's either what's expected of me or it's what I should do for my family or my community. It can sometimes my cat just jumped up on the table. She's really excited about this particular video, it seems. So I don't know what that says about my cat or about this content, but it's special either way. Um, the queer trans experience, I think, sometimes suffers from a lack of ritual containment and ceremonial holding, despite the fact that, like, for some of us, coming out as queer or coming out as trans and undergoing things like surgical procedures or beginning hormone treatment, I mean, for many people, that's definitely on the level, if not even more pronouncedly meaningful and important than things like, a wedding ceremony or other life events that often have a lot of ritual and ceremony around it, like, school graduations and whatnot. Um, but because of both the stigmatized nature of the experience and also the reality that a lot of queer trans people have a challenging relationship with spiritual and religious settings, that ceremonial containment can sometimes fall by the wayside. And it's been my experience in instances where I have either facilitated or offered someone guidance on how they might construct a ceremony to honor their coming out with, that is incredibly beneficial for the psyche, the soma, and the spirit of the person who's undergoing the threshold crossing of coming out, because the ceremonial container is a process by which all parts of us are supported and being ushered from one reality, from one era of our lives to another, and therefore we are able um, to meet the fullness of ourselves more fully because we have offered it a ceremonial chance, a ceremonial container, um, to really, really acknowledge the importance of what is being undertaken here. And again, a ceremony like this can be as public or as intimate as one wants, but to at the very least acknowledge that our queer trans experiences and our the moment that we decide that we are choosing to enter the world as the fullness of ourself, which may or may not be recognizable for the rest of the world. That's you could say that's a transfiguration of the sort that, in my view, merits a sort of reverential witness and space holding, to honor the sacrality of it. So if you're someone who is queer or trans, or who is discerning whether or not you are queer or trans, and you are wanting, spiritual support in that, and or possibly guidance and support on, ceremonial space holding, for any kind of possible coming out, I would be honored to work with you, and just want to affirm that it is actually very, very common for queer and trans people to have spiritual needs, especially spiritual needs that are not well met, and this is something that is also just a very, very human need to be held in spiritual witness and ceremonial space, as we navigate as big of a transition as these. So know that there are many spiritual care providers who are queer and trans, who can, offer spiritual support for you if you're finding yourself in this space. One great resource for you to check out would be the online care directory called Queer Healers. There's well over 200 people listed on that platform as at the moment that I'm recording this, some of whom may specialize in ritual and spiritual care work that aligns to a particular tradition that you belong to. But regardless, just know that there are people out there who are ready and able to support queer trans folk with their spiritual discernment and ceremonial needs. Me being one of them, but not the only one. And wherever your discernment as to your sexuality and your gender take you. I pray that you feel yourself held and witnessed well in that process, because that experience is a very, very sacred one and a very holy one. And it's one that aligns with so many spiritual teachings and frameworks on expanding the realm of what we understand to be possible when it comes to how we relate to ourselves and to the world. So many blessings to you on your journey. And know that you're welcome to message me with any questions or comments or inquiries that you might have as a result of, seeing this content. So thanks so much for listening. Bye for now.